What's going on, boxing fans? It's Julian Williams with the distance. I got another fantasy matchup for today from one of my colleagues from the boxing union, Pacquiao. If you're able, send me this one. This one's actually really hard. Jack Dempsey versus Smoking Joe Frazier. Wow, this is a matchup. This is just a hard matchup to do. Just because of the comparison of eras involved. Jack Dempsey was the champion from like 1921 to 1926, and Smoking Joe was the heavyweight champion from like 1970 to 1973. So you have two former world champions. You have one, pressure fighter, and the other who's pretty much like if you look at it, Jack Dempsey was kind of a counter puncher. A lot of people say he was an attacker, but he waited for his opponent to make a mistake so he could capitalize on that mistake. That's just the type of fighter Jack Dempsey was. Smoking Joe, constantly applied pressure, but at the same time, with Jack Dempsey, when he was against a fighter who would constantly apply pressure, he didn't want to take that risk. He didn't want to take that chance of getting hit or getting hurt and stuff. He wasn't much of a risk taker, as a lot of people think he was. Jack Dempsey. I think that Jack Dempsey was an old counter puncher. But not a counter puncher in the sense of what we see as a counter puncher today. But he was a guy that capitalized on mistakes. A lot of there have been a lot of people, a lot of historians that have said Jack Dempsey. Well, first off, I'm going to say this. Some people may be thinking, wow, this fight would have never happened. But a lot of historians say that Jack Dempsey ducked, ignored, never fought black fighters, was afraid of black fighters, this, that, and the other. But when you look at it, there was only one black contender at the time, and that contender was Harry Wills. He agreed to fight Harry Wills, but the promoter, who also promoted Jack Johnson, I think his name was like Tex Richards, pulled him out of the fight. So Jack Dempsey was gonna fight a black fighter, the only black contender at the time, who was Harry Wills, but the fight didn't happen because the promoter pulled the fighter out. That's something that has never been of note. But Jack Dempsey versus Smoking Joe Frazier, hard match to analyze. I think that in this matchup, Joe Frazier will, apply a lot of pressure on Jack Johnson. I think that Joe Frazier will come forward, and I think he'll throw hooks to the body and go up top like he usually does. Because Jack Dempsey was very flawed. Now that you look at, because Jack Dempsey, a lot of people look at Jack Dempsey as this glorified brawler and stuff, and he wasn't necessarily a brawler, but his hands were down, his hands were wide apart, and that was kind of the style that a lot of those fighters fought with back then. It's just like telling me to do a fantasy matchup between Jack Johnson and Joe Louis. Jack Johnson's hands were down compared to Joe Louis, whose hands were always up. So with the changing of boxing styles over the years, you have to ask me, with what style? Would Jack Dempsey be fighting with the type of style that the fighters from the 70s were fighting with, or will Joe Frazier be fighting with that same type style that Jack Dempsey fought with, when the arms wide apart, and kind of just come forward and attacking? It just depends on which type of style that that they're fighting with. But with this fight, if you have Jack Dempsey fighting with his arms apart, Joe Frazier would eat him alive. He's going to get as many shots in as he can, due to the fact that he does apply constant pressure, due to the fact that also he could corner you and get his shots in as well. So So if it was that style, I think that Smoking Joe Frazier will win the fight, hands down. Just because Jack Dempsey's just gonna be very open, and we look at him as flaws today. In a different boxing world as it was back in the 1920s when Jack Dempsey was fighting. So with the style comparison, the fact that Dempsey did kind of fight with this bull type style, and his hands were just it was just kind of like this, and the straight right hand or the straight left hand's there, or the hook was there, and they didn't have these different techniques that we have now. With the fights, there was no, there wasn't necessarily, the blocking that we have now. They didn't have, the same, the type of defensive styles that we have now. A lot of the fighters just went in and slugged it out, and I think the fact that Joe Frazier has a guard, and the fact that he does, throw a lot of shots, to the body and moves it up to the head and just mixes it up. I just think that Joe Frazier beats Jack Dempsey. Because like I said, it's just like comparing a fight between say Jack Dempsey and Joe Louis, or John L. Sullivan, the bare knuckle fighter, against Gene Tunney. Gene Tunney. I just think that Gene Tunney would easily beat John Sullivan in a 15-round fight, because John Sullivan, being a bare knuckle boxer, hands were kind of like this, and it would be low. So Gene Tunney could hit him with the right hook, left hook all night, even though John L. Sullivan was a tough fighter. But with the difference of styles in this matchup, I'm going to say Joe Frazier, because, in the 70s, they were more technically sound. Fighters are more technically sound in the 70s, than they were in the 1920s. And it's changed every 10 years, every decade in boxing. The styles in every division, every fight have changed. And just due to the fact that it's more safe to fight. It was more safe because Jack Dempsey fought. He did little rabbit punches, with hold and hit and all that stuff, and would constantly attack. I just think that Smoking Joe Frazier, from a very technical standpoint, has all the advantages in this fight. And on top of that, Jack Dempsey was not, necessarily a heavyweight. He was a cruiserweight, So I just think Joe Frazier wins this fight just because of the style involved, because Jack Dempsey's going to be open to a lot of shots. He didn't take risk, and other than that, he's going to, and on top of that, you didn't really see much defense from Jack Dempsey. So I'm going to say Smoking Joe Frazier wins the matchup by a 15-round unanimous decision if this fight was ever to happen. But anyway, that was Distance. Thanks for watching. Peace.